Today we are using Paradym to build a user authentication system. I'll show you how to issue credentials to new users that sign up and how to verify them when they want to log in. Let's get started. For this demo, I created this fake banking website. When users want to sign up for the bank, they can type in their name and their email address. And when they press sign up, a workflow starts that will issue them a credential, and they can receive this credential by scanning this QR code using the Paradym wallet. Once they have this credential, they can go to the login tab, and when you want to log in, you also scan a QR code, and if you have successfully presented this credential, you will be redirected to the dashboard where you are now logged in. For this demo, we need to create 3 workflows. The first workflow will focus on registering our credential template. This is where we define what properties our credential needs to have, in this case our banking account credential. The second workflow will focus on signing up new users and then issuing them a credential based on the inputs from the sign-up form. And the final workflow will be the login workflow, where we will verify credentials when users want to log in. Let's jump right in. So let's start with the first workflow, registering our credential template. I'm here in the Paradym dashboard and I'm going to hit new workflow. And this is our workflow editor. And the first workflow is actually really simple because we can use a template for that. So I'm going to the templates tab over here. And here we go, the create a credential template. So I'm going to use that. There we go. This is all we need for the first workflow. I'm going to publish it. And I'm going to run it. And this is where we define the attributes of our credential. So first the name. I'm going to give it the name banking account. And the network is check testnet, which is fine for now, and it's version 1. And here we define the attributes for this credential. So in the sign up form we have a name and we have a email. Make sure to capitalize these. And yeah, I think I'm ready to execute this workflow. So this will bring you to the execution overview screen where you can see our workflow is running, and these are the input attributes for our workflow. And here the first action is done, the create schema, but we need the result of the second action because it will first create a schema and then it will bind that schema to us by creating a credential definition. So that should come in any minute now. There we go. The create credential definition action, and our workflow is completed. I'm going to copy this over because we need it for our second workflow. Back on the dashboard, ready to create our second workflow. Let's hit new workflow. And here we are back in the workflow editor. So our second workflow will focus on signing up new users. So taking the values from the input fields, adding them to our workflow, and then issuing a credential using these values. Let's first give it a name. We call this sign up new user. This will be triggered by an API call from our demo application. So I'm going to keep the trigger on type API. And as for the input object, I'm going to define what input properties are required to call this workflow. And in our case, that will be the name and the email address from the sign-up form. So let's define these. Name, which is of type string, and email, which is also of type string. We can make these required by adding them like this. So name and email. Now it's time to define the actions for our workflow. For this use case, we need 2 actions. First, we need to set up a connection by showing a QR code in our demo application. And then when the user scans that with their wallet, we can issue the credential. So let's start with the first action, which is called create connection. And we can hit enter so that it auto completes. We don't need to do anything else for this one. It will create a QR code, and once scanned, it will continue to the next action. The second action will focus on issuing the credential. So let's type issue credential. And here we need some attributes. So first we need a connection ID. of the connection we have just created in the first action. We can reference the output of create connection using the following notation method. So let's type $actions.create connection, which is the ID of our previous action. And then by defining output, connection, and connection ID. So now we have taken the output of our previous action and used that in this action. The authentication object contains two properties. The first one is credential definition ID. And here we can use the result of our previous workflow. So I should still have that on my clipboard. There we go. The second one is attributes. And these are the actual values that we are going to issue in the credential. So as you remember, that is name and email. So we need to take these values from the input of our workflow and put them inside this action. We can do that using the $.input and then .name. And for email as well, $.input.email. And there we go. This is our sign up workflow. We can now publish it. And let's go to the final workflow. The last workflow will focus on logging in new users. Let's hit new workflow and set a name, in this case, login user. This workflow will again be triggered by an API call, so we can keep the trigger to type API. And this workflow actually doesn't require any input properties, so we can remove that. For the actions, this workflow only needs one action, which is the request presentation action. And what we are going to do is we are going to create a presentation request with an invitation. And using that invitation, we can render a QR code on our app. And by scanning the QR code, the user will receive a request in their wallet for presenting their credential. And once they have accepted that, then the presentation request is completed. So let's start by typing request presentation with an invitation. And this only has one attribute, the authentication object. And here we define the request. So let's give it a name, a login request. This needs a version, which is version 1.0 for now, and the attributes. And this is where we define what properties we want to request from the user. As you remember, our credential has two properties, a name and an email. In this case, I'm only interested in the email, so I'm going to request that. So let's type names, which is an array of property names we want to request. In this case, email. And for this, we need to set some restrictions because we want it to come from the credential that we have issued. We can do that by defining restrictions and then setting the credential definition ID of the template we have created in the first workflow. So I'm gonna paste that in. That's it. This is our login workflow. Let's publish it and move over to the application. Both the login and sign up workflow are triggered using an API call. And for that we need an API key. If you go to the dashboard and click the API keys tab, you can create one. And I'm going to call this demo and create it. And here you have my API key. Let's copy that and move to the application. So here we are in the application. You can find a link to the repository in the description below. First, we need to set up a few values. We need to set up our API key, our login workflow ID, and our sign-up workflow ID. And luckily, these are already defined as environment variables, so we just need to set them there. Let's copy this example file. So the API key we have just created, so let's copy that. Now for the login and sign up workflow ID, we move back to the platform and you can copy the ID over from the tab on the left. So let's copy the login and go to the sign up workflow and copy that as well. These are all the values you need to set up. So now you can install the dependencies. After all the dependencies are installed, you need to set up the data storage, and you need to do that using npm exec drizzle-git push SQLite. This will create an SQLite database. Once that is done, you can run the app, and it should now be running on localhost 3000. So here you can see the demo flow. First, I sign up for an account by giving in a name and an email, and once I press sign up, the first sign up user workflow starts. And by scanning this QR code with my Paradym wallet, I will receive the credential. So here you can see the correct details. Once I have accepted it, I'm redirected to the dashboard, and if I want to log in again later, then the login user workflow starts. And again, by scanning this QR code, I can present the credential I just received. And there we go, I'm back on the dashboard. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. A link to the repository and the workflows can be found in the description below. Leave a like, and I see you in the next one.